then I'll start. I'll introduce the Pepsi annual report. And this report, the term for it is September 1st, 2020 to August 31st, 2021. And just as a review, the legislative requirement is housed in Session Law 2017-189, also known as Senate Bill 599, and it requires an annual report by the Commission no later than December 1st of each year. And it is presented not only to the State Board of Education, but is also provided to the Joint Legislative Education Oversight Committee about any of the activities of the preceding year, together with any recommendations and findings regarding improvement of the teaching profession that Pepsi, um, through the Pepsi, their work. And just to let you know, the report overview, the report structure is, it starts out with an introduction, committee membership and structure, and then it goes into NC Department of Public Instruction personnel and gives an overview of the meetings, which also houses a policy guide, and then a meeting summary, and then concludes with a future subcommittee work overview. And I wanted to give a few membership updates because, as you know, membership can change within the commission. As a few reminders, Session Law 2019-122, that allowed membership to be staggered so that every 2 years alternating members would be renewed instead of everyone at once, um, to provide continuity within the membership of Pepsi. Uh, we wanted to make sure that we had some members that were already established on the commission. If people did choose to leave, it wouldn't be everyone at once. And then current members have terms ending either August 31st, 2021 or August 31st, 2022. And now I want to go into members who have left. Um, Mr. Andrew Lacus, he was the executive director for Teach for America Eastern North Carolina. He left in January 2021, and he was replaced by our current state superintendent, Catherine Truitt. He served as Mark Johnson's superintendent designee at the time. And then also Mrs. Glenda Jones, she retired from Cabarrus County Schools as their assistant superintendent of human resources and communications. And she left in March 2021. And we are now seeking a replacement for her. So that is in process right now. And then there are several members whose membership terms expire August 31st, 2021. And four of them, Dr. Penfield, Dr. Bullock, Dr. Graham, and Dr. Fleming, we are seeking renewal right now for their membership terms that would be extended into 2023. Mrs. Maureen Stover, she is the 2020 North Carolina State Teacher of the Year. So each year, a new State Teacher of the Year comes on board, and so this coming year for 2021, starting in September, it'll be um, Eugenia Floyd. So she is actually on the call right now, observing and soaking in as much Pepsi as she can. And then Mr. Tabari Wallace, he he was the principal member of the group, and he is now taking a position with NCDPI as a special advisor to the state superintendent for principal engagement. So we are also looking for a principal replacement for his seat. And so for 2021, 2022 Pepsi membership, um, just to give an overview, there are four members that are pending renewal. the four that I previously named: Dr. Bullock, Dr. Graham, Dr. Fleming, and Dr. Penfield. And then there's a vacancy for a principal, vacancy for a teacher, vacancy for a personnel administrator from an LEA in North Carolina, greater than or equal to 30,000 students. And then also we have jumping on board Ms. Eugenia Floyd, who is the new state teacher of the year. And then I just want to jump into a few highlights of our meetings that we've had. So we've had 42 meetings scheduled during 2020-2021. We've had 30 subcommittee meetings, and they've extended from student teaching placement concerns due to COVID-19 all the way to what we've been working on recently is the North Carolina Pathways to Excellence for Teaching Profession Subcommittee work. And the four subcommittees are preparation and entry, licensure, advancement and development, and budget and compensation. And we also recently have started to focus on the Foundations of Reading assessment update to look at that test to see how the update affects that test and if it meets the needs of North Carolina. And to conclude with that, the highlights, we've had 12 monthly meetings. And in conclusion, I just want to stress that we've done a lot of work this year, and we are going to continue to do a lot of work with these subcommittees, the four subcommittees: prep and entry, licensure, advancement and development, and budget and compensation. And I just want to give kudos to the commission because we have a very dedicated bunch, and they really are working hard to get things done for the state of North Carolina and for the students in this state. I do want to note one thing about the annual report, that I think there's about 4 meetings towards the end of it that have not had, they need to be updated because those meetings have not happened yet. So I'm letting you know that those 4 meetings will be updated and the links will be added as soon as they happen. And let me know if there's any questions.
What questions do you have? Hearing none, I also like to offer kudos to our Pepsi support staff there at the department. All of you work extremely hard to make sure that we have what we need so that we can do what we're supposed to do. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank each one of you, Dr. Evans, Dr. Tomberlin, Dr. Seiberg, and Dr. Socks for his work with the subcommittee. So thank you for that. With that, do I have a motion to approve the 2020-2021 annual report for the Professional Educator Prep and Standards Commission to be sent to the State Board for discussion in September 2021?
So moved, Aaron Fleming.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. Do we have a second?
Second, Chris Blanton.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion and a second to approve the 2020-2021 Pepsi annual report. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of approval, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. The annual report has been approved. Thank you, Dr. Evans. Next on the agenda, Dr. Seiberg will provide an update to the policy amendment that we discussed last month for LICN-003 regarding foundations of reading.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, commission members. For this discussion, excuse me, a question was raised at our meeting last month in July about the equivalency of the old Foundations reading test and the new Foundations of Reading test that Kim and I were not able to answer at the time that the meeting was going on. And long story short, over the past couple of weeks, we've navigated this territory, and we determined that the term equivalency, as we used it in the July meeting, and ultimately the decision that was made back then, really can't be applied to those two exams. And so I want to bring this back to give the Pepsi Commission an opportunity to revisit this item and make sure that the recommended score that's coming to the board is in good conscience and is well informed. So let me just share with you a brief update on this, just to remind everybody what we're talking about. On slide 3 here, we have this Pearson Foundations of Reading, which has been in place in North Carolina for a while. We also know that as 090, and essentially there's a new version that's coming out, which is 190. And essentially the difference between the old test and the new test is the new test has science of reading addressed in it, and that is an area that the Literacy Task Force and Superintendent Truitt and other stakeholders within the state really want to see moving forward, is a component of all literacy training and preparation for folks that work in schools going forward. Now, the challenge to the fact that these two tests are in play is that we in North Carolina cannot stop that Pearson will be posting on their website both of those tests. And because those will both be there, we run the risk that there could be some confusion from candidates as to which test to take, either the old or the new, and that out-of-state folks may be taking the new version, and so we need to figure out a way to try and navigate this. So essentially, the proposed solution then would be to recommend to the board then to allow both of these tests to be in operation, 090 and 190. And this would be acceptable for the elementary education and exceptional children general curriculum for in-state and out-of-state initial license applicants. And then essentially what that does is then cover the bases. So this would allow candidates to operate under either of those until such time as Pepsi and the various stakeholders can contribute in a very deep analysis and vetting of all the possible tests that are out there that enable science of reading into their assessment, and then this item would come back to Pepsi to decide ultimately what would replace 090 in the future. So for the moment, this is a sort of a band-aid we can think of until the proper vetting is put in place to make sure that that it could be 190 in the future is the test of preference for North Carolina. There could be others, and that work is undergoing as we speak. So let's talk a little bit about this passing score. I want to explain to you the process of how the scoring was set up for the old test. When 090 was adopted a couple years back, the state initially considered the national recommended benchmark score, which was set on a scaled score of 240. And from there, it was determined and ultimately passed by the board to allow and accommodate a statistical adjustment of one standard error of measurement from that 240, which was applied, and that was an 11-point error of measurement, and that would then have lowered the score from 240 to 229. So North Carolina approved a score of 229 on the old test, again based on the national benchmark and allowing for one standard error of measurement. And that standard error of measurement then allows us to set the score that's grounded in that benchmark, but captures the uncertainty inherent in any single test score. So then when we go back to considering the new 190 exam, essentially we're going to recommend that we apply the same process here. that we go with the national benchmark, which Pearson has also set to 240, and apply the same statistical adjustment to accommodate for one standard error of measurement. In the new test, that is a 7-point difference, so that would reduce the score from the benchmark of 240 down to 233. So the proposed recommendation then to this commission for consideration is to allow for both the foundations of reading 090 with the same cut score of 229 that's always been in place, and to allow for the new foundations of reading, that's test 190, and apply a cut score of 233 using the same statistical processes that were allowed for the old test, and leverage that to be acceptable for elementary ed and exceptional children, both for in-state and out-of-state applicants, until such time as Pepsi is prepared to make a recommendation to the board that ultimately gets rid of the old test in favor of a yet to be determined permanent solution that includes the sorry, lost my train of thought there. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. No, that includes science of reading in it. Sorry. So that's the recommendation that goes to the board or to the commission today. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Dr.
This is
Steinberg?
this is Catherine. So help me understand, are we going to be phasing out the old test? Is that the goal here?
Well, I think yes, I think based on your initiatives as well as the meetings that the recommendations from various literacy groups that presented to the board more than a year ago now, that the inclusion of science of reading into the curriculum and ultimately the best practices that science of reading brings to that that process is a logical extension of that would be then to include science of reading in testing going forward. You also see that not just for North Carolina, but you see that in the update that Pearson is doing as a vendor who provides these assessments. They are updating their test, which is what's coming to us today, because of that same desire to include science of reading into that process. So yes, I think at some point when we can do the proper vetting, we would expect that there is going to be a desire to remove the old test because it doesn't have science of reading in it for a test that does have science of reading in it.
When you say vetting, you mean vetting of the new test?
Yes.
Okay. And so what we're proposing is having these two tests for now reside alongside one another rather than vetting and adopting the new test now and grandfathering in those pre-service teachers who are currently not the colleges of education haven't had a chance to adjust their curriculum to reflect the changes that would be included in this test, or to align their curricula to the science of reading. Is that fair assessment?
That is a fair assessment. Anytime you change an assessment like this, it is very common within the state and other states as well to allow some flexibility in transition from an older test to a more updated test. And this again is to address exactly what you were saying, that this requires adjustments and fine tuning of curriculum and expectations in the preparation programs to make sure that that all these new expectations can be met. So it's very common to have both tests in play for a year or even 2 years, and then phase out the old test as the new tests and expectations are met.
Okay, so I see Tom's got his hand up. I would, after Tom speaks, I would love for our deans to weigh in on what that time frame looks like.
Yes, thank you. Chair Miller, with your permission, I'd like to.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So I think Superintendent's raising a very important point here that that we may have glossed over a bit. So the adoption of 190 to run concurrently with 090 is a temporary solution to the advertising problem on the website. We don't want anybody to take this accidentally and not be eligible for the license. But there's another consideration. 090 is going away. So as we look to do the vetting of the new test, it may in fact be 190 that serves as the bridge that Superintendent Truitt is talking about as we selected. If we select a different assessment, then it would be 190 that would be serving as that bridge, because 090 would be going away. And I think I'd like like Superintendent Truitt, I'd like to hear from the EPPs on kind of, if that's the way we have to construct this, what the reasonable time frame there would be.
Good morning, this is Ann Bullock. Tom, do you know when 190 will go away? Do we have information on that yet? I mean, or whatever that test was.
I do believe Dr. Seiberg does.
Okay, Andrew?
I don't actually off the top of my head. I'll have to check. I mean, I feel like we can go to Pearson and request them to have it in play for a couple of more years, but I'll have to double check on that.
Okay, so I would think, given the timeline of curriculum committees and changing curriculum, and it's a bureaucratic process, and since EPPs didn't know about this change until I think less than 3 months ago. I could be incorrect on that, but I believe we just heard from DPI this summer. I would think a 2-year time frame would be a very fair one to go with.
Yeah, this is Van Dempsey. I'll add to what Ann just said. It's going to depend, at least on our campus, as to whether the changes are in a graduate or undergraduate program. Graduate tends to go faster, and whether or not we're talking about something at the course revision level, or it sort of expands out into program change level, and those are two different timelines. But I would say 2 years. If everything went smoothly and well, 2 years is a start.
This is Hank, and I agree totally. I think 2 years would give us enough time to make whatever transitions are necessary, not catch some of the students who may have been taught under another curriculum caught off guard with a new test.
And this is Randy from UNCG. I concur with my colleagues on that.
I appreciate your honesty about that. And while 2 years seems like a long time, I, of all people, understand that it's not in the world that we live in. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and Superintendent Truitt, I'll add to that all of this sort of gets bookended by an assumption on one end that programs would be totally inconsistent with the new foundations of reading, and on the other end, they're completely consistent. And I guess I would suspect all the programs are going to land in the middle somewhere. So it's not a wholesale changing of programs. We just got to get our hands in it and figure out what that looks like.
Yep, that's exactly right. I 100% agree with that.
This is Maureen, and this is slightly outside the context of this conversation, but just as I'm listening to this, our beginning teachers will be coming into the field possibly not prepared with science of reading and the letters training. So just a note to make that we need to make sure that we're providing the support to the districts to support those beginning teachers. since their colleagues will have had that training, just to make sure we have a plan in place to make sure we're meeting those beginning teachers' needs and supporting them fully as they enter the field.
Yeah, very good point. And we will be continuing our contract with Letters, with Voyager Sopris, to allow for not just beginning teachers, but teachers who transfer into North Carolina, who are pre-K through 5th grade teachers, will continue to receive Letters training. Absolutely.
And I would just, this is Hank again, just throwing a little plug. I know that there are lots of EPP faculty out there who would love to be exposed to the Letters training at some point, if that's ever a possibility, so that we could make sure we're aligning our curriculum with what they're going to be going into when they get into the classroom.
Well, I love that you mentioned that, because we do have a very coordinated approach to ensuring exactly what you just said occurs within the UNC system, thanks to UNCGA and Laura Bilbro-Berry. And we do have NCICU representation on our my Operation Polaris Strategic Plan Literacy Task Force. And so I think that we're moving toward a time where we're going to have to find deans or EPP leadership from our private and independent colleges and universities who are willing to assume the role that Laura Bilbro-Berry has. So that exactly what you said, Hank, so that everyone, professors who are ready to take this plunge can be exposed to the same training.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I'll add to that from the UNC system perspective, but I suspect the same will be true with the private and independent campuses. If we can, let's say we're making a decision hypothetically that it's the new foundations of reading, and within X amount of time, that is the test North Carolina will use, and then programs need to get themselves aligned and consistent with that test. If we could do that, sort of across the board, we get all the programs in the state involved in that, and then we have a sense of when we can expect that students would be leaving EPPs, going into the field with that knowledge base secured. And I'll go back to what I said earlier. We should not make the assumption that many, if not most of them, don't have it now. I know we do at UNCW. So we're not starting from blank paper.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none, would ask for a motion to allow both the current Foundations of Reading test 090 with a cut score of 229 and the new Foundations of Reading test 190 with a cut score of 233 be accepted for elementary ed and exceptional children general curriculum in-state and out-of-state initial licensure applicants. Do we have
This
a
is
motion?
Catherine, so moved.
Thank you, Catherine. Do we have a second?
This is Maureen, I second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second for the proposed recommendation that you see on the slide there. I'm not going to read it again. Is there any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, those in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Seiberg, for the presentation.
Sure.
Next, we have Dr. Laura Hart, Director of Accreditation and Continuous Improvement for the Cato College of Education at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. She will present on the Common Memorandum of Understanding. Dr. Hart.
Good morning. Thank you all for having us, having me here today to review this work with you. I'm going to share the summary and the updates from our common MOU work, and then I'll obviously answer any questions that you may have, and hopefully we can move forward with these, with sharing these documents with our stakeholders. So, Kim, if you'll move it forward for me. Thank you. So 4 pieces today on how I'm going to share this information with you. A little bit of background on our stakeholder working committee, then a little sharing on how we proceeded in the work, how we gathered feedback, the final documents, and then finally next steps and some recommendations for this group here today. So in developing these documents, it's been a very interesting year. I've learned a lot around legal processes, and had some great conversations with some of our attorney friends related to the work that they do on this. Kim, if you can forward that one for me. The Stakeholder Working Committee, when we were approached, and when I say we, I am a member and the Advocacy and Policy Chair for NCACTE, which is the North Carolina Association of Colleges for Teacher Education. We were approached by Dr. Seiberg and asked to initiate the common MOU stakeholder work. So we brainstormed and came up with a list of groups that we definitely wanted to include, and representation from all the groups that you see on your screen was included in our final working group. I think it's really important to note, and Kim, as I speak, feel free to just move to those that next slide. The folks that were involved came from a lot of groups, and we had a lot of legal expertise on our group, as well as human resource directors and EPP field placement folks who had a variety of different perspectives to the work, things that particularly have become important with the pandemic. The pandemic has really highlighted the need for us to be able to quickly respond in the way that we operate and the field experience agreements that we have with one another as far as school units and university and school EPP partners. And so you'll see we have folks on here from representing the North Carolina Council of School Attorneys. We had system office folks. The independents are also represented, as well as university individuals. So how we proceeded, we began our work by just getting everybody on a Zoom call, several Zoom calls actually, and developed some guiding principles. And one of those principles was we definitely wanted to be sure that we included an opportunity for stakeholders who actually use these documents to give us feedback on those. And because of that, that was very important to us. This process was extended, perhaps longer than, we could have quickly put a different document together, but it wouldn't have been as good or as robust. And I think the resulting documents are much stronger because we definitely wanted to be sure we included that stakeholder input. So we began with these 3 principles in mind, and they sustained us through our process. Authentic engagement was very important. We did go through several drafts with the committee, and then finally did post a version of this on our NCACTE website, which we shared with all of our P12 stakeholders. We sent information out to the field. Dr. Seiberg shared something via his listserv. We got as many folks aware of it as we could. And we also encouraged people at universities to share it with their university attorneys. So got lots of different feedback there. We definitely focused on flexibility and sustainability. And one of the things that you will see in the final versions of these documents is there's the MOU document, but we have created what we are calling a supplemental document to help establish expectations around, I'm gonna call it the in the weeds work related to field experiences, things that need to be determined but aren't necessarily raised to the level to need to be included in the actual MOU document. And then finally, transparency and timeliness. So definitely wanted to be sure that we got things out to the field very quickly. And I'm sorry, Kim, I didn't mean to jump there, and in a timely fashion. So we started in September 2020 with our groups, and then we've met consistently almost for a year. So we have 3 documents to share as a result of this final work. If you can go ahead and move it forward, that would be great. The first document that you have is a cover letter that just provides the general context of what I'm sharing with you, how it was developed, the members of the committee. The second document you have is the public feedback and the committee response. So we took all the comments that we received. We actually posted a Qualtrics form to allow folks to give us feedback and respond. We took every comment that was given to us, and we read through all of them, and we responded to every one of those in this document. So if folks are so inclined, they can go in and see our responses to that. It was very, very helpful to get lots of different eyes on this and to take all that good feedback and incorporate it. We made lots of changes based on the feedback we received from the field. And then the MOU document itself actually has 2 parts. The MOU language, the legal language, and then what I referred to earlier as the supplemental document. So if you look at your attachments, the MOU, the first 13 or 14 pages is designed to include the legislative requirements for clinical partnerships. And we have written it deliberately so it applies to teachers, principals, counselors, instructional facilitators, anyone who is doing some sort of a supervised field experience in a school or agency. It does not have to be a school. There's certainly, especially with our pre-K programs, we see a lot of agency placements, and so in daycare centers and things like that. So this document would work for all of those pieces. It does have sections that you see outlined there based, again, the framework here is what are the legislative requirements that are in statute that we need to be paying attention to, and that's the attention to those is in the actual MOU document. There are some areas that are deliberately left blank, and we highlighted those in yellow for the school units and the EPPs to collaboratively complete. The supplemental document helps with this, and you can see just a couple of those there. You know, the duration of the MOU agreement. Some districts may want it to be for a year, some may want it for 2, some may want it for 3. That is something that can be decided. Another one is insurance coverage amounts for EPP students. Those are things that are required. And so we left those blank because those obviously could be different depending on the school, the situation, is it a charter, those kinds of things. The second piece that I think is really the nice feature of this document is the supplemental document. We very quickly realized that there were a lot of questions from the field in particular that folks wanted to be addressed in the MOUs, but they didn't all necessarily need to be addressed in the MOU document. For example, how many times a student teacher or a principal intern is observed. Those things may change, and they did change with the pandemic, right? And how many times folks could come in and out of school buildings. We didn't want to have to renegotiate an MOU every time that happened. So what we have done is created a supplemental document that all the legislative mandates, all the legal pieces are required and are in place, but there are some details that are left to individuals, a representative from an EPP and the school or the district to iron out. Orientation content, that's not anything that needs to be in an MOU because a lot of people have different orientation content, but that's something that the folks involved should probably all be aware of. So it is intended that the supplemental document be reviewed and those questions be answered and addressed, and that everything that's in there you know, those common expectations be created by the entities involved, but that the MOU document wouldn't necessarily have to be revised every time you make some sort of a detail change. So for the next steps, We have 3 recommendations for you from our working committee today. Our first recommendation is that these documents be housed on the DPI site. That's a logical place for schools and EPPs to go look for a common MOU document. We recommend adding some sort of a mechanism, whether it's a standing item or however you all want to do that, to have a group to convene and review these documents every 2 years. Things do change. Folks, the legislature makes new changes. The residency model is a great example of that. There's a whole section in the MOU related to clinical residencies. But that could be something different in a couple of years. And so we strongly recommend that somebody stay on top of this, so to speak. And then finally, we recommend wide public dissemination and endorsement of these documents. We acknowledge that this is a resource. These are not mandated for anyone to use. Any attorney would tell you that that's probably not going to fly, but I think using them as hey, these have been vetted. Here's the history. Here's what we've included. We've assured that many legal eyes have looked at these to assure that the pieces are there. And we've also talked with our school and our district and our university partners to say, here's things that we also feel like need to be addressed in that supplemental document. It's a nice set of resources at this point. And we hope that this commission and the state board will endorse them, not mandate them, but endorse them and recommend public dissemination of these documents. I'm happy to answer any questions or talk further.
Great. What questions do you have for Dr. Hart?
This is Catherine. No question, but I really like your recommendation that these documents be housed on DPI's website. Thank you for making that recommendation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Catherine. You've been great to work with on this process.
Thank you.
This is Tom Tomberlin, if I may.
Yes.
So I think I concur with Superintendent Truitt. I think this would be great as a resource on our website. My question would be, given those inevitable legislative changes that will come along, would you envision the updating going back through the process that you described in developing this document, or would DPI what would be that process for updating the resource?
So this is just my 2 cents based on everything I've learned over the last year. I would strongly recommend if there is a major change that that whoever sort of maintains oversight of looking at this with DPI and that a process at least that somewhat mirrors the one that we went through, where you have multiple folks from a variety of different organizational perspectives looking at it. And even if it was, say, for example, Tom, just to, kind of follow that train of thought for a second, let's say the residency model, a couple of years that it completely gets changed. Hopefully it's, not that unstable, but let's just, for the sake of argument, I think the perspective of having somebody from the university legal side, from the school district legal side, from all those different perspectives, certainly it helped us immensely to not just, frame it one way. And there's a lot of things that I don't think about that I think districts do, and vice versa. So, it could be a shorter, quicker turnaround, obviously, to try to update the document. But if there is a mechanism to pull together a group similar to the one that we did, I thought it was incredibly helpful as we move forward.
Great, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none, thank you, Dr. Hart. We value your collaboration with Pepsi, particularly in your role within CAPD, and look forward to future collaboration as we continue along this path. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Now the co-chairs for the 4 subcommittees will provide an update on their work, and we will start with preparation and entry. Van and Hank.
Hank, I think we're alternating and it's my turn.
I'm good with that.
Okay, sounds good. As an overarching reminder, we're looking in our subcommittee at the 4 elements of the pathway: apprentice, license 1, license 2, and 3, the EPP component. And we're doing that through the lens of the entry point requirements, the roles of EPPs and LEAs, and supporting people at different parts of the pathway. And we're looking at the potential support of beginning teacher support program, and then how the EPP accountability model might change or be modified given the resolutions we may come to. A few key updates from our last meeting. One is we've spent more time talking about a framework of practice that cuts across those 4 areas, and not see each one of them in isolation. We've also had several conversations about what we're sensing is a need now for discussion across the subcommittees as we start to see dots get connected across the different groups. We have now worked through all 4 of the components in our subcommittee, so we're going to circle back and look at each one of the previous components that we reviewed to try to look at it holistically rather than as 4 different components. And I think Hank and I meet with the DPI staff next week to get ready for the next meeting.
Great. Any questions? Hearing none, we'll move right into licensure. Ann and Wesley.
Good morning. This is Ann. Wesley and I just had our own planning session to prepare for our meetings going forward this fall. So we did not meet in July due to travel and other conflicts. So we meet with DPI soon, and we should be back on board, and we're getting ready to get into the different levels with the different, and look at the components to move forward within the different levels. That's it.
Thank you, Ann. Any questions? All right. Advancement and development. Michael and Maureen.
Good morning. This is Maureen. So at our last meeting, we're again still struggling to get our subcommittee to really hone in on the specific skills that would be necessary to move between each one of the licensure levels. A lot of good conversation is happening. A lot of really great ideas are coming up, but we are still really struggling to get our committee to actually nail down those specific skills that would be necessary. So in our last subcommittee chairs meeting, we talked with Dr. Sachs, and we looked at what are some of the existing documents or some of the existing materials that we could maybe reference to come up with some different ideas that we could propose to our subcommittee. And so I will be meeting with Dr. Sachs on the 18th to prepare for our meeting on the 25th. To really develop some robust lists that we would be able to present to our subcommittee, and then have the discussion centered around those specific skills that Dr. Sachs and I have identified, to see if we can get our subcommittee to begin actually committing to the skills that they think would be recommendations to bring to Pepsi. So we're really looking forward to our meeting on the 25th, and hopefully when I come back to give the next subcommittee report, I will have great news that we are moving forward in developing some of our skills we want to present to Pepsi. Another thing, I would like to thank Kim for all of her hard work that she has done throughout this entire process. She also, in response to some of the questions that we had coming up, developed 2 resources that we're going to present at our subcommittee meeting on the 25th. And one of those is a timeline that just kind of outlines the timeline of what we're expecting to have each one of the subcommittees have their recommendations prepared and then present those to the state board. And then she also developed a resource that shows the different connections and the different responsibilities and roles of each one of the subcommittees. And so I think both of those documents will be very helpful at our meeting on the 25th to help our subcommittee understand kind of where we are on the timeline, and also where we fit into the bigger picture of getting these recommendations to Pepsi and then on to the state board. Thank you.
Excellent. Any questions for Maureen? Hearing none, we'll move into budget and compensation. Aaron, I think you're on your own today.
All right. Well, we'll see how I do here. At our last meeting on July 19th, I believe it was, we had an opportunity for Dr. Cyberg, Dr. Baxter to introduce the compensation scenario tool. We broke up into subgroups. Everyone took some time to do some different scenarios of each potential model or minimum maximum salaries based on the level. And we've got numbers all the way ranging from 600 million in new money up to $1 billion, I believe, if I remember correctly. But we will, they've worked on the interface a bit, and I believe we will be working on this again at our next meeting.
All right. Any questions? Hearing none, would just again like to thank the co-chairs of the subcommittees for your work leading those subcommittees. It's very much appreciated. With that, I would like to recognize Mrs. Maureen Stover, the 2020 North Carolina Teacher of the Year, for her service to Pep-C during 2020-21. Ms. Stover has provided invaluable insight and leadership throughout her term, and we thank you for your time, hard work, and contributions. Also, thank you, commission members, advisors, and staff for your preparation for today's discussions. I remind you that our next monthly meeting will be held on Thursday, September 9th, beginning at 9 o'clock. We've now completed our meeting, and unless there's additional business at this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a second?
Second is Randy.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 We're adjourned. Thank you.